bottom, that's narrow at the bottom and thick at the top. Okay, and now I'm going to go in and lay in a little more detail where the roots are. And this combination of sharper lines from the pen against the rougher lines of the brush and the dry brush is part of what starts to create the interesting textures and so on. Any kids that are watching at this point are like, when is he going to put the dinosaur in this thing? Okay, now I've got this stump here, and I wanted to have this just covered with moss. I'll share a little tale with you as I do this. I used to hike, I grew up in northern Vermont, Duxbury, Waterbury area. I used to hike Camel's Hump a lot. I was a Boy Scout up there, and we used to go up Camel's Hump a couple of times a year. There was one hike I have really fond memories of where after the sun had gone down, my friend Mitch Casey and I went walking around a little bit up there, and we saw what looked like a large, glowing, ghost-like object in the woods. Did we run away? No, we went toward it. And it turned out that it was an entire tree stump covered with either phosphorescent or iridescent moss. It was glowing a soft green from all the sunlight that it had been exposed to during the day, and it was releasing that, and it was just beautiful, and I never forgot that. My friend Gerhardt, who lives up in Canada, a little north of Kitchener, Gerhardt used to do the backgrounds on the comic book series Cerebus. Gerhardt and his wife Rose took a trip out to Vancouver, and Gerhardt showed me some of the photos that they came back with, and there are parts of the northwestern forests up around Vancouver that are just entirely covered with moss. It just is like a green carpet on everything. So that's the feeling I want to get just with this tree stump, that this tree stump is so old and decayed that moss has completely taken over the form itself, and it's just this downy, soft object. And part of the reason I put it on this side of the drawing is so that it would contrast with the harsher lines that I'm going to be putting on the birch, and it's just going to hopefully create a more interesting picture. Now these, I'm laying in a different direction pen line for the part of the stump that is not covered with moss, and getting those kind of contrasts is important. I'm going to do a little bit of cross-hatching. Cross-hatching, for those of you who are watching who don't know these highly technical terms that artists use, is having lines that go in two different directions. This is cross-hatching here, so that you're creating a new gray pattern that is different than when the lines go in a single direction. In this case, I'll do some cross-hatching on some of these roots and leave others as they are, which will hopefully give them look like they're different levels of the undergrowth here. Okay, let's do a little bit of, I'm going to use a little bit of the pen up here with the conifer. And again, at home I would do this with my brushes, my beat brushes, but, and I want to create a pattern here that is different from the moss pattern, but also echoes it a bit, because this is part of the balance of the picture, that I've got this mossy stump here. And the reason I made the conifer tree on this side instead of this side is I wanted to have that sort of texture balancing act, if you will. Now I'm just going to do a little bit of pen work on the conifer tree because I'm going to do the bulk of it with my brush. And I'm not going to worry about, the specifics of what branches are where and so on and so forth. This is all about, for me right now, just creating these textures. And working with this finer crow quill point, what I'm getting right now are these really short staccato pen strokes. And they just feel more like conifer needles to me. I can feel them sticking in my clothes right I just put a fingerprint here, it's going to become something. Never waste a smear when you can make. Now, a lot of cartoonists and some painters are never seem to be sure what to do with branches. And if you really look at branches, as long as you have a central branch that they're growing out of, and you adhere to the principle of the spread, like veins, are coming from a single direction, they will look like branches. There's also the principle similar to drawing the tree, that the thickest part of the branch is going to be the closest to the trunk. The narrowest part, just like the capillaries in our circulatory system, are going to be toward the ends. And I tend to do this part with the branches just with pen rather than with brush. One of the things I've mentioned before in class, but I don't think I've ever mentioned in this demo setting, is there's a lot of chaos in the woods. I never believe in drawings or paintings I see that have like pristine and strangely sterile and symmetrical forms when they're doing forest or something that's supposed to be the woods. There's just a lot of chaos in the woods. There's branches that broke off on the top of the tree and got caught on the way down. There's tons of broken vegetative debris and so on the forest floor. So one of my rules of thumbs is to make sure that at some point in the drawing I just add random lines that aren't really meant to be anything other than to sort of convey that clutter of the woods. And as long as the patterns are consistent with natural forms, the eye will interpret them as being part of that clutter. So that was what that moment of spazzing was all about just a moment ago. Now you notice I haven't laid any branches on the birch tree as yet, and there's a reason for that. First of all, all birches, their branch growth is in the higher elevation of the tree. Young birches, you may be able to climb enough to get up there and bend them over. Not good for the tree, but great for Robert Frost poetry. But there's not a lot to hold on to. And that's one of the things when you're drawing trees, is at least get those basics. You know, it doesn't matter whether the viewer knows they're looking at an oak or a chestnut unless there's a narrative point to that. And narrative comes up constantly in our classes at the Center for Cartoon Studies because we're not an illustration school. It is a cartooning school, specifically a storytelling school. But you do want to make sure that